Hi everybody, quick reminder, don't forget to check out the on-screen end cards towards the end of the video, as well as the merch shelf and links down in the description below to explore my new OUTCAST comic book series. And I just have to say that I genuinely appreciate all of the support that's been shown for this new adventure. Now let's dive in to Robert Louis Drake, aka Bobby, aka Iceman, who happens to be a 5 foot 8 inch tall, 145 pound mutant with blue eyes and light brown hair, who I happen to believe to be one of the most powerful mutants in existence, period. Convince me otherwise. And who has officially been declared an Omega level mutant for quite a while now. And by the end of this video, you'll see why. In the pantheon of Marvel Comics, few characters embody the concept of latent potential as profoundly as Robert Drake. First being introduced in the X-Men issue number 1 that was released in September of 1963, he was initially presented as the baby of the team, a visual gag, a walking snowman whose primary function was comic relief and crowd control. For decades, this perception of Iceman as a mid-tier elemental blunted the reality of his capabilities. However, if you dive deep into his publication history, it will reveal a slow, terrifying trajectory from a teenager throwing snowballs to an Omega level entity capable of halting the entropy of the universe. And that's no exaggeration. Matter of fact, this classification is not merely a measure of raw, vast superhuman strength, but a reflection of his ability to manipulate the fundamental laws of thermodynamics on a planetary scale. Now, to fully understand Bobby, one must first discard the colloquial understanding of ice powers. He doesn't generate ice, he manipulates thermal energy. In the current House of X, Powers of X paradigm established by Jonathan Hickman, an Omega level mutant is defined as one whose dominant power reaches an undefinable upper limit. For Iceman, this limitlessness applies to negative thermokinesis. Unlike pyrokinesis, which involves the excitation of atoms to generate heat, Iceman's powers are the reduction of atomic motion. He acts as a universal heat sink. When he freezes an object, he is psionically stripping it of kinetic energy, and the implications of this are staggering. You see, the first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be destroyed, only transferred. So when Iceman freezes a liter of water, the heat energy must go somewhere. Earlier representations of him suggest that he radiated this heat harmlessly, but modern feats suggest that he shunts this energy into an extra-dimensional space, or converts it into the binding energy that reinforces his organic ice form. Also, by reducing thermal energy, Iceman eventually reaches absolute zero, or 0 degrees Kelvin, or negative 273.15 degrees Celsius. At this theoretical floor, atomic motion ceases, electrons stop orbiting nuclei, superconductivity occurs. Matter enters a Bose-Einstein condensate form. So Bobby's ability to function at and inflict this temperature means he's not just freezing water. He's halting the passage of time and the function of matter at a quantum level. Now, his physiological body is an anomaly. He has the ability to transmute his cellular structure into organic ice. This is not just a coating or a shell, it is a total molecular conversion. In his early years, Bobby appeared as a snowman, suggesting that he was merely covering his body in atmospheric frost. In later years, his form became crystalline and translucent. This shift represents a mastery of density. The original snowman look was a subconscious armor, but the crystalline look is his true form, nearly as hard as diamond, yet flexible. Now, Iceman also has what's called hydro-assimilation, meaning that if his arm is shattered, he doesn't require medical attention. All he needs is moisture. He's been shown to easily pull water vapor from the air or liquid water from a nearby body and psionically integrate it into his biomass to regenerate the limb immediately. In itself, this grants him a form of pseudo-immortality, because as long as moisture exists in the planetary atmosphere, Bobby Drake cannot be destroyed by physical force. Now, in the early 2000s, during the new X-Men era, Marvel introduced the concept of secondary mutations, evolutionary leaps taken by mutants under extreme stress. While individuals like Emma Frost gained a diamond form, mutation was the ability to exist as a sentient water vapor. Therefore, he can consciously sublimate from a solid to a gas vapor instantly. And in this state, he is intangible, invisible, and capable of entering the lungs of opponents or traveling through ventilation systems. This mutation also reveals that Bobby's consciousness is not localized to a brain. It exists as a psionic field that inhabits the water molecules. So if his body is vaporized, his mind remains intact within the moisture cloud, allowing him to reform miles away. This creates a horrifying combat potential. He can literally travel through the water table, the jet stream, or the blood of his enemies. Another little-known fact is that Iceman does not need to see the world through the reflection of light in the visible spectrum alone. You see, he possesses what's called thermal vision, allowing him to perceive the universe as a map of heat signatures. This has many applications. For instance, he can track enemies through the walls by their body heat, and he can identify structural weaknesses in machinery or buildings by spotting friction points or cooling vents. Also, when pushing his powers to its limits, he can sense the temperature fluctuations on a global scale, effectively feeling a heat wave in the Sahara or a blizzard in the Antarctic, merely as extensions of his own sensory systems. Now, Iceman's history is a case study in power creep, intertwined with character development. We can categorize his life into distinct eras, each marked by a specific leap in capability or a shift in his psychological state. Now, from the beginning in the Silver Age, he was the class clown. Being born in Floral Park, Long Island, to William and Madeline Drake, Bobby's early life was defined by the tension between his mother's Jewish heritage and his father's Irish Catholic background. This dual identity contributed to a feeling of never quite belonging, a feeling that was exacerbated when his mutant powers manifested. His first public use of his power, freezing a bully named Rocky Beasley to save his girlfriend, Judy Harmon, resulted in a mob attacking his home. And this traumatic event, where he was actually jailed for his own quote-unquote protection until Cyclops broke him out, set the stage for his deep-seated fear of persecution. During his tenure with the original 5 X-Men, Bobby was the youngest. And to cope with the paramilitary strictness of Cyclops and the intellectual heaviness of Beast and Professor X, Bobby adopted the persona of the jokester. He threw snowballs, made ice slides, and rarely pushed his powers beyond simple geometric structures. During this Snowman era, he visually looked like a pile of snow. This soft appearance mirrored his soft approach to combat. He was afraid to hurt people. He was afraid of himself. During this era, he would also fatigue quickly and required high ambient moisture to create ice, a limitation that would later be revealed as psychosomatic. Now, after the original X-Men were replaced by the international team, Wolverine, Storm, and etc., Bobby tried to leave the life. He attended college at UCLA and became a certified public accountant. This desire for a mundane, structured career in accounting was a desperate attempt to impose order on his chaotic life. However, he could not escape heroics. He would co-found the Champions of Los Angeles. And this era is critical because he began associating with near God-level beings like Hercules and Ghost Rider. It was during this period that the Snowman look would fade, being replaced by the angular crystalline ice form. This more hardened exterior suggested a maturation of his powers, and he was no longer covering himself. He was actually becoming the element. Now, during his next stage, when the original 5 reunited to form X-Factor, Bobby's powers began to spike uncontrollably. During this period, he would begin wearing an inhibitor belt to dampen his output, the narrative explanation being that his powers were leaking. During this period, it was also when the Asgardian trickster named Loki recognized Bobby's potential long before the X-Men did. Seeking to use Iceman against the Frost Giants, Loki forcibly ramped up Bobby's powers to dangerous levels. This tampering actually proved that Bobby's limits were mental, not biological. And Loki showed that Bobby could cover Manhattan in ice within seconds if he simply stopped caring about collateral damage. Now, the X-Men Gold Team era was one of the most pivotal moments in Iceman's physiological history. Because after a telepathic accident, the consciousness of the White Queen, Emma Frost, took possession of Bobby's body. Emma, a ruthless pragmatist with no fear of power, used Bobby's body in ways he never dared. She would readily freeze the water inside of people's bodies, travel through water mains as liquid, and freeze entire rivers instantly. So when Bobby regained control, he was traumatized but enlightened. Emma would actually taunt him, telling him that he was an Omega level mutant acting like a novice. Interestingly, this shaming would actually prompt him to train more, and he would begin to experiment with hydrokinesis and molecular density. During this period is when he learned how to survive being shattered and would realize that pain in his ice form was a phantom sensation he could ignore. Now we would next see during Decimation in the Messiah Complex that following M-Day, when Scarlet Witch depowered most mutants, Bobby would be one of the few to retain his powers. And now things were serious because he was now a protector of an endangered species. During this era, Bobby had a complicated dynamic with Mystique, where she often challenged his dedication and his potential. In one notable arc, he was shot and shattered completely, but he reformed in a jagged, frightening new shape, indicating that his mental state was fractured. During this period, he would begin to use his powers to manipulate chemical reactions on a microscopic scale, and even stop near nuclear level explosions by stealing the heat required for the reaction to propagate. However, next up, we'd see Bobby take a dark turn. Because in the Dark Angel saga, Bobby was infected by a death seed from the Age of Apocalypse timeline. This celestial nanotech removes the moral compass and inhibits fear, turning the host into a weapon of evolution. We'd see Death Seed Iceman almost instantly plunge the Earth into a new ice age, with him also creating massive sentient ice avatars that could operate independently of him across the globe. During this period, we'd see him achieve a new level of combat dominance, because he would fight the X-Men and Thor to a standstill, nearly taking Thor out by freezing the blood in his veins. A feat that actually ignores the durability of Asgardian physiology because it attacks the fluid dynamics within the body. This arc confirmed that the only thing keeping Bobby from ruling the world was his own conscience, because it was clear that his power output is sufficient to cause an extinction level event within hours. Now, in the more current era, when mutants started living on the island nation of Krakoa, Bobby is utilized not just as a soldier, but as infrastructure. With the Marauders, we'd see him traveling with Kate Pride on her pirate ship, and Bobby would act as heavy artillery. Here we see him even more comfortable with displaying a darker edge, willing to freeze limbs and shatter individuals without hesitation when defending his people. However, I'd have to say one of his crowning achievements occurred during the planet-size X-Men run. Because to create a home for the Araco mutants, the X-Men terraform Mars. Bobby's role was to provide the water, but he didn't transport it. He actually synthesized and condensed the polar ice caps of an entire planet in moments. He was key in stabilizing the planetary temperature to allow an atmosphere to form. And this feat puts him on par with near god-tier beings, because he actually altered the climate of a celestial body, which speaks for itself. Now, of course he had help, because he worked in concert with several other extremely powerful beings. Storm was in charge of the atmosphere, and Magneto helped generate more gravity. However, Storm can create pressure systems, but without moisture, there's no weather. And so Bobby would travel to the Martian poles, where he psionically expanded the trace ice found in the Martian soil, multiplying its volume exponentially to help create oceans. So, to freeze or condense that amount of water on a planetary scale requires an energy sink equivalent to the output of a very small star. Bobby himself acted as this sink. But if you thought that was it, you'd be wrong. Because in Fantastic Four X-Men crossovers involving the entity known as Black Winter, who was a multiversal devourer that eats universes, Iceman performed a feat that borders on magic. During this battle, Iceman actually said, "I will freeze time itself." See, the physics behind this is that temperature is a measure of atomic movement, and time in a thermodynamic sense is the direction of entropy. And so by reducing the temperature of the Black Winter's Herald to absolute zero and beyond into theoretical negative temperatures, Bobby halted the quantum fluctuations that define the passage of time for that entity. This confirms his powers to extend into the quantum realm, affecting the fabric of space-time. And to go on, Iceman's lethality is often underestimated, because in a battle against Legion, yes, that Legion, one of the most powerful reality warpers, Bobby was able to freeze the water in Legion's brain cells instantly. He didn't need to break Legion's shields, he just manipulated the matter already inside the shield. Over the years, we've also seen Bobby successfully temporarily incapacitate several Hulks. Because while Hulks are strong, they're still biological. And by dropping a being's core body temperature, Bobby would be able to slow their metabolic rate, putting the rage monsters into hibernation. Oh, and he didn't have to worry much about being trapped or grabbed by a powerful being such as Hulk or Juggernaut, because he can vanish into mist and reappear behind enemies. And he's also been shown to be able to potentially pull an enemy into his ice dimension, or simply encase them in ice that's harder than steel. Over the years, Bobby's even demonstrated the ability to create more and more complex structures that defy structural engineering. For instance, building ice hinge and massive palaces. These ice constructs can withstand heat vision and even missiles, implying that he manipulates the lattice structure of the ice crystals, aligning them for maximum tensile strength, similar to how carbon can be graphite or diamond. Another unique thing is that snippets allude to a pocket dimension storage. And while not a standard inventory system, Bobby's ability to shunt matter, turning from a giant back into a human for instance, implies that he stores his excess mass in an extra dimensional space, or converts it to pure energy. So overall, we see that Iceman's journey from a snowman to an Omega level being is complete. He now stands as one of the pillars of the Marvel Universe. His power is no longer defined by how much ice he can create, but by his control over the entropy of systems. He's a living heat sink, a being who can turn a paradise into a tundra or a dead planet into a water-rich Eden. But more importantly, Iceman represents the triumph of self-acceptance, because his power was never just about biology. It was about having the bravery to be confident in oneself, unlocking the doors he had bolted shut in his own mind. This Omega classification is not just a power level. For Bobby Drake, it's a statement of freedom. He's finally, truly cool now. Pun intended. Now, for his powers and abilities and his influence over the many years of the Marvel Universe, for my 1 to 10 rating, I'll give Iceman a rating of 10, which is a legendary rating. And I did think about that one. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. I'll talk to you next time. Be sure to like, hype, and subscribe to The New Sage.